before we go ahead and apply the render map property, I'm just going to go to my low-res model and turn off the visibility for primary and secondary rays. Because like we mentioned, we don't want to render the low-res version, but rather the distance from the camera to the high-res version. So once that's done, we can just put the render map property on the object on the low-res version. I'm going to set the resolution to 1024. You want to use a size that's large enough to capture all the displacement resolution. And as well, it's also good to stick with regular intervals like 256, 1024. Tends to give better results. Let's apply spherical projection on the low-res version. And of course, if you're using more complicated geometry, you need to UV unwrap it and make sure there's non-overlapping UVs. Because of course, using render map, it'll stamp over that same area with different renders and give you garbage results. So that's important. You can use the unique UV features in conjunction with render map, and that's quite useful. I think we'll talk about that a bit later on as well. So if we go to the advanced tabs, there's a few more settings here. Because we're doing displacement map, what we want to do is set the texture with a neutrality, a gray neutrality first. So we're going to make it 50% gray. And what this means is no displacement map, because as it records the say where the surface goes in as a negative displacement, so as a black color, and the positive areas as a white color, gray will basically mean no displacement. So we want to make sure the entire map is gray first of all before we start cooking in the deltas there. Textile coverage, we'll leave that. Calibrating the camera. Now this is a fairly important thing to keep in mind with render mapping. If we go back to our conceptual kind of model here, like we'd mentioned, this camera sort of scans the surface, stays perpendicular to the surface that has a render map property on it, and renders as it goes along. And we can actually control how far the camera is from the surface. So what that means is, because we have this high-res model that isn't exactly lined up with the low-res model, it at times can be sticking out quite a bit from the low-res surface. So the camera can actually penetrate the high-res version. So in this case, if we don't specify the distance camera far enough, you can see the camera can go inside the surface and it'll do the scan, but we're actually going to be rendering the interior of the high-res version, which is not what we want. What we want to be doing is capturing it from the exterior. So that would be bad. The other extreme is bad as well. If the camera is too far away, you basically will introduce distortion into your render map and you'll get inaccurate results because the camera is too far away to capture the surface detail. So it's really, there's this sweet spot where the camera is just far away enough so it's away from the maximum displacement of the model, but it's still close enough to capture all the detail. So you really have to calibrate it to get that. And one of the tricks I suggest, what you can do is, if we just go to a high-res version here and use the Frontback shader, so you go under Switch Frontback and connect that to Surface. Basically, front polygons will render red, back-facing ones will render blue. So in this way, if the camera's penetrating the surface, we'll know because we'll get some blue in our render map. So it's a kind of a good way to check things. So let's just say, for example, we'll set the distance from the surface to 0.1, and let's generate that map. So once that's done, we're going to render map folder. So I'll just go to my image clip viewer. So you can see there we're rendering some blue. So the camera has penetrated the high res and is rendering the interior in some spots. So what we can do is just back the camera away a little bit. Let's go 0.2. So you can see that result. The blue is covering less of the surface area. So that clearly means the camera is pulling out a little bit, not quite far enough. A little bit more. Okay, so you can see we minimize it quite a bit. And this isn't exactly rocket science at all. Like you don't have to be that accurate, but if I go to 0.6, we can do another test run there and see what that gives us. So in this case, the render is all red. That means the camera is outside of the object, and we're pretty good to go.